What's up, Nets fans? Welcome to another episode of the Brooklyn Buzz, presented by OTGBasketball.com. I'm your host, Nick Fay. With me, as always, the great Australian Jack Manuel. What's up, Jack?
Always a pleasure, Nick. Shout out to my fellow Aussie, Mitch Creek, for getting a training camp invite to our squad, and happy birthday to Damari Carroll.
Yeah, big shout out to Damari. Obviously, we're hoping the Australian that was signed by the Nets was Jack, but it wasn't. But big shout out to...
Unfortunately not.
Yeah, maybe next year. Maybe next year we'll get the camp invite for you. But And shout out to Jared Allen, who released an exclusive T-shirt today, which is pretty cool.
Sick, that sort of NBA old school jam style. Man, I wish I was at Coney Island right now.
Yeah. As always, just a quick reminder, check us out on iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, OTGBasketball.com, Google Play, Dash Radio. Retweet us, share us, let us know what you think in the comment section. We want to hear from you. We'll definitely be doing a mailbag soon, so possibly on the next episode, keep an eye out for that. But Jack, obviously, this offseason, there's been plenty of hype about Nets players, specifically D'Angelo Russell, Spencer Dinwiddie's gotten some hype, maybe even a touch of Jared Allen. But which Net do you think is being slept on this offseason that no one's really talking about that can make another stride next year?
Yeah, for me, it's Allen Crabbe, Nick. He had his career year last year. I've been listening to a plethora of podcasts in the offseason. There's still so much content available, a lot of it through OTGBasketball.com. And, he averaged 13.2 points, 4.3 rebounds, 1.6 assists. He's 37.8% three-point shooting and an effective field goal percentage of almost 53%, which I think will rise. I think all those numbers will rise. He had numbers last year. He had a couple of games, I think 2 games above 30 points, including that scintillating 41-point performance. I think that was on his birthday as well, which was one of the best games I've seen a Nets player play in my sort of fandom.
Yeah, one of the best games of last season from a Nets player, really.
Absolutely. And, I'm on his sort of his game log summary from B-Ball Reference. And he had 27 games where he scored 0 to 9 points. If he can eradicate those 27 games and turn them into 10-point or plus games, automatically it makes him a better player and more effective. And I think that he's one of the guys, he's not like a Dlo, he's not like a Caris. He's not posting many workout videos and stuff. He did have a chat at Summer League that I think we touched on very briefly. He was sort of saying, look, it feels good to just be 100% healthy going into training camp. He didn't have that last year. And we talked about that, how it affected him early in the season. He still had his moments, 20-point bursts, huge 3-point bursts. But I'm big on Allen Crabbe, despite the fact that, I know Danny LaRue and Nate Duncan think he's on one of the worst contracts in the league. I think he's going to live up to that $19 million, and I think that we're going to see, another jump. Very young. He showed some real strides defensively, and I think it's going to be a big year for him.
I think the one point that you hit on that is super important is last year he wasn't 100%. He didn't get that full offseason with the Nets. Now getting a full offseason with the Nets and their coaching staff kind of developing their game, also a full year in the system. And I would say in the second half, he looked a lot more comfortable. He looked a lot more confident in himself. He wasn't really pressing as much. And like you said as well, the defense, he really took a stride in defense, kind of improving that area. And I think that's big going to next season. And we know 3-point shooting is super important in Kenny's system. So if Crabbe can kind of just get more efficient, like you said, we saw the burst, we saw the flashes. Now, if he can just kind of make that consistent through 82 games, the Nets are going to be really good shape with having a 3-point shooter like him and Joe Harris.
Yeah, I think that he's going to want to try and aim for that 40% range. Joe Harris was obviously probably our best 3-point shooter, one of the best in the league, if not the best. So I think aiming for that 40% range, having just 40, 50, 90 splits, I think is a really sort of positive thing to have, as sort of what D'Lo is aiming for. I think Allen Crabbe can legitimately aim for that. He is obviously going to be a volume 3-point shooter, so it's going to be a little bit hard for him. Joe Harris does it against second units. Allen Crabbe likely, and in my view, will do it against starting units and probably, tougher competition. But he has all the tools to be, a guy that sort of aims for that range. And, JJ Redick, Kyle Korver, these guys are volume shooters in the same sort of vein. He did it in Portland in the sort of third role, but I think now that he's going to have the attention, he knows what's coming at him. I think later in the year we also saw some better driving from him. And, Joe Harris, we talked about him at length being literally the best driving percentage in the league. I think Allen Crabbe had better nights than that, and I think that's going to sort of show him, give him sort of, better room, better sort of maneuverability, and just give him a more flexible game. And I think I'm looking forward to this season from Allen Crabbe. I'm certainly going to be watching him.
Yeah, and I feel like the driving thing, like you mentioned, he can kind of work on that in-between game. It's just like the small things. Obviously, he's a talented basketball player. It's just kind of working on his craft and taking it to the next level. And obviously, last year he had a bigger opportunity than any time he really had in Portland. So I'm looking forward to it as well. So Caris LeVert is my dude. And I think, obviously, for numerous reasons, Caris LeVert is going to be the guy just because that people are sleeping on because he doesn't have that star hype. There wasn't much hype with him in the draft, but I think there's a couple things that people forget about. We've mentioned on the show a million times, in college, he's dealt with a lot of injuries, not getting a ton of playing time on the floor. Then his rookie season, he missed a good chunk of that. Last year, he missed some time as well. But after February, including the 2 games in February, 24 games, averaged 12.8 points per game, 46.6% from the field, 38.5% from three, 4.3 assists, 3.1 rebounds, 1.7 turnovers, and 1.1 steals in 25 minutes. Now, look, production-wise, you're like, all right, those numbers aren't much higher than what he did, but they're a lot more efficient. The fact it was only the fact that he shot 46% from the field and close to 40% from three are really big. And then the fact he kind of cut those turnovers down. And like I said, getting more playing time and just more time on the court. And I think some of the additions are going to help Caris as well. Obviously everyone who played with Jared Allen last year kind of benefited because he was really the only true roller on the Nets by the end of the season. Obviously Booker left and Zeller left. So now having an Ed Davis, a Kenneth Reed, I think is going to really add to that as well. And then we've seen him working. He's been a guy who's been posting a lot of Instagram videos, working at 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, working in the sand, working in the desert, doing a lot of workouts, putting on strength. And I think the fact he spent time with his summer league team and just the coaching staff around there, I think is only going to help him kind of take that next level.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a big year for Caris LeVert. Obviously, the trade talks were sort of, murmurings around him last year. A lot of teams were sort of asking about him. I love the sort of consistency that, Coach Kenny and Sean Marks have shown with him and the sort of confidence they have in him. And I think he's going to pay that back. I love his game. I think that, he has such a wide array. I think Damari Carroll said on a recent podcast that he has the ability to play 1 to 3, and if his frame even improves, he could even play a small ball full role. And I think he has that ability as well because he has such a wide skill set. We saw his 3-point shot improve, like you said. I sort of pinpointed in my season review article for him on OGBasketball.com that he loves this sort of one spot similar to LeBron James, sort of at the top of the elbow of that perimeter. And, he shot really well from there. And it's just, if you've got that spot, it makes you a weapon. And like you said, the other guy's improving. If he's playing in lineups with Dlo and he's getting that attention, that's going to benefit Caris. If Spencer Dinwiddie continues to improve and Caris is playing with him, that's going to benefit him. And that's the same with Allen Crabbe. If we see improvement within the guys in our roster, as well as guys like Shabazz Napier, Ed Davis, the increased talent is only going to work wonders for the guys making that next step next season, like Caris and Allen.
Yeah. And I think one other area where Caris can really help the Nets is kind of take that next step defensively. I know you got after him a little bit about some of the small fouls, just the stupid fouls, kind of clean that up. I think adding some strength is going to really help him in that department as well. He led the Nets in deflections last year, 164, and it was by a pretty good margin. And he wasn't obviously didn't play the highest minutes on the Nets last year. So I think that's a plus. And then not to mention the strength. I think last year, obviously being a second-year player, he didn't get a ton of respect going to the rim, but being stronger and going to the rim a little bit harder is going to help you with those foul calls, get to the free throw line more, and it's going to help you just finish better. And I think that's going to help him a lot because we know that hesitation move is great. As soon as he kind of gets a step on somebody, he'll kind of be able to put him on his hip and kind of get to the lane. So I think Caris is a guy that a lot of Nets fans, I just feel like, haven't mentioned when talking about players that are going to make a jump. It's been all, and not in a bad way, it's been D'Angelo-centric, which obviously I think he's going to make a huge jump and probably be an all-star next year, hopefully, if everything goes right. But I think Caris is a guy we have to keep an eye on too.
Yeah, I mean, all of our young talent. We could even chuck in Jared Allen in there.
I was going to, even Rondé, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, literally no one is talking about Rondé.
The
fact that I mean, he's been posting little bits here and there on Insta and Twitter, like he had on Twitter the other day. Like, I wish I was in New York and I was able to respond to the tweet where he's like, does anyone want to come rebound for me? Yep. I'm in the New York area. So, I mean, if they're rebounding for him, maybe he's practicing that 3-point shot. We don't know. He's not a guy that's sort of hanging out with the sort of, big-time trainers, Chris Brickley, Drew Hanlon and stuff. But there's no doubt that these guys have a great work ethic. And, I think Damari Carroll and the leadership, it has instilled that within us. The culture, the camaraderie, the chemistry. I think all those things are going to bode well for us going into the season. But, I think it's all going to translate into whether we stay healthy. If we've got the right training staff and we've got the right team around everyone, I think that it's going to bode well if we stay healthy. Then I think we're going to see, marked improvements from all of our guys.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there's just so much possibility with the player development. We'll kind of talk about that in our next segment right now. So ESPN dropped their power rankings, Jack, and they ranked the Nets 28th. What was your initial reaction to this?
Well, immediate shade, Nick. Corey mentioned it. You guys talked about it on the outlet as well, because I retweeted it out and I was just like, what, really? And on the OTG power rankings, we had them 24th, which to me, I had them a little bit lower. I had them at 25th, but I think is around that range. You could go anywhere from like 23 to 26, even 27 if you're going to be a bit lowly on them. But 28th, I think, is far too low. When you're looking at teams, like Phoenix, like New York, like Orlando, like Chicago,
Atlanta,
even Cleveland, Atlanta. It's all these teams, I don't think are any worse, any better than us in any sort of range. Funnily enough, the person who is credited with writing the sort of synopsis, whether he did the ranking as well, remains to be seen. Chris Forsberg is a Celtics writer. So I don't know if there's anything in that. I doubt it. But reading the sort of synopsis, all of the things that were said were positive. But then it came up with a 28th ranking. And, the fact that we're under the Knicks, we're under the Magic. I don't see, the Magic don't have a freaking point guard.
I know. I was thinking that too.
Aaron Gordon is their best player. Mo Bamba showed signs, but not much. Jonathan Isaac showed signs, but not much. It bewilders me that some of these teams, I can get the Bulls to an extent because, they've got Parker, they've got Levine, they've got Dunn, they've got these guys that are sort of have high upside. They're sort of on these, flashy sort of contracts, even the Phoenix to a lesser extent. But, and the Knicks as well without Porzingis, Kevin Knox, might be probably the best prospect out of the two New York teams, but we've got sort of a plethora of guys. And I think a lot isn't being mentioned about the depth that we've got. So yeah, for me, it bewildered me. And it just shows to me how much smarter the people at OTGbasketball.com are compared to the ESPN stuff, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, if just looking at it from the perspective of last year to this year, there's no way the Nets got worse than last season. They're not going to be worse. And just looking at the guys that they added Ed Davis, Shabazz Napier, Trevion Graham, Kenneth Faried, Jared Dudley, Shana Musa, Rodion Kurocs. And then the guys they lost, Jeremy Lin, who only played 25 minutes for the team, Timothy Mozgov, who was unplayable, Isaiah Whitehead, who spent most of the time in the G League, Quincy Acy, who is a headache for pretty much 80% of Nets fans. Dante Cunningham was solid. Jahlil Okafor really struggled. He couldn't find his groove, and he might not even be in the NBA next season. Nick Stauskas just signed for a minimum deal. I'm not super high on him. And Milton Doyle and James Webb are kind of fringe NBA players that are trying to perfect their craft and get in the league. So they lost all these guys who were, fringe NBA players other than maybe minus a few. And they added a whole bunch of guys who are proven rotation guys other than Giannis Musa and Rodion Kurocs. There's no way they can be worse than last season because they have so much more depth. Last year, the biggest issue, if you subtract, I want to say the month of February, the Nets record is looking a lot better than it did. Obviously, they're still bottom 10 team. But I want to say they won 1 or 2 games in February, and a lot of that was because Caris LeVert and Rondae Hollis-Jefferson were out. Now they have guys that can fill in that position, kind of give you some production, and now are known for player development. Kenny Atkinson is known for player development, and you're trying to tell me all the young guys we just mentioned, D'Angelo Russell, Jared Allen, Caris LeVert, Rondae Hollis-Jefferson, Spencer Dinwiddie, even the rookies that we bring in this year aren't going to get better. People are going to get worse. It's not like the Nets are one of the oldest teams in the league. So I really don't understand how they could be 28. I can understand in the 20 to 26 range if you wanted to put them, but saying they're the third worst team in the NBA just doesn't really make sense to me. And I just feel like it's just part of the perception that the Nets are that bad team that they have to get over that hump.
Yeah, and you look at our previous ranking on ESPN was 25th, and you look at the Orlando Magic's was 28th, and they somehow climbed 2 spots by adding Mo Bamba and Melvin Frazier and Timofey Mozgov. How do they climb those? For me, I'm
wondering. They lost Biombo, who played a good minute. I mean, he wasn't great last year, but he played some solid minutes for them at different points.
And they also lost their guy who averaged the most assists in Shelvin Mack, who is no world beater, but he was still their best guard.
Solid,
and they lost Mario Hazonia as well, who showed some real nice flashes towards the end of the season. For me, that's the one that sort of probably, pardon my French, but pisses me off the most because I think we're a better, if we see the best version of Bamba and Isaac, then that's certainly a possibility. But they haven't shown anything. Whereas our sort of prospects, Dlo, Caris, Jared Allen, have already shown glimpses at the NBA level. I don't understand how this Orlando Magic team has gotten 2 spots better. Whether they're the summer intern guys are probably doing these lists for ESPN.com, and it's not like a Brian Windhorst or a Zach Lowe. That certainly would not surprise me because obviously listicles can be fun to talk about and can be a decent in-depth read. And there's a lot of good ones on OTGbasketball.com because they have some research about them. But this seems like it was done by, a couple of interns who probably aren't getting paid enough to sort of put a list together.
Yeah, it feels like the Nets just are like, oh, they've been a bad team. They're going to be bad again. We don't pay attention to what they did this season or last season or what they did in the offseason. And I don't see how you could say the Knicks are going to have a better season if Porzingis doesn't play. Like there's and even the Bulls, like I can understand the argument, but I still think the Bulls defense is going to be trash. Like I think all those teams, like, and we've had writers on our staff and as well as writers across the league who have mentioned they think the Nets could possibly be a fringe playoff team for the 8th seed or be in that kind of 8 to 11 range instead of bottom 4 in the East. So this kind of I was kind of shocked in a way. I was shocked in a way that they're ranked 28th, but then again, ESPN has felt like has never really shown much love to the Nets over the last 5 years, and for good reason. But this year is when they should actually be getting some kind of credit for what they've done, and they didn't really get much at all.
Look, I'm hoping that this is, in a way, is a sort of motivating factor for
Yeah.
a lot of our Nets guys. I'm sure that they would have seen that, obviously, they look at, you see what's being said by the media. And I think that, the Nets have such a sort of tight-knit group that, they may use that as motivation. DeMario might sort of like post it on the wall. I know that he sort of said that he posted like, the salary dump thing on his wall. So any sort of motivation for our guys, I think is only going to be a good thing. And, you can make arguments for and against till the cows come home. But I think once the season starts, that's when we want our guys to let the basketball do the talking. And I'm hoping, and I'm not just hoping, I have faith in the fact that, Coach Kenny can get them to do so.
Yeah, and I think another thing you mentioned Amari and him posting that up, I think as well having other veterans on the team will help. Last year they had other veterans, but they weren't really established guys. Like Jared Dudley's been around the league a lot. He's a well-known guy, especially with NBA media, and he's been on winning teams. Same thing with Ed Davis. Just bringing in guys like that, Kenneth Faried to an extent too. Like having those guys around, I think is just going to help the young guys in a bigger level and just kind of make that jump. And everything we've heard from the Nets is they're looking to be more competitive this year. It's not like they're looking to tank. The only way I could really truly agree with this ranking if the person who ranked the Nets thought they were going to tank this season because they have their pick back.
Yeah. And I mean, if some people might look into that into an extent, and I know Nate Duncan of Dunked On has said, like, he doesn't see why the Nets would go for a playoff spot. But for me, Sean Marks has always preached, building a culture and building a winning culture, you can't tank in that sense. And I don't think that the Nets are good enough to sort of like, go for a top 4 seed, but they're around that range of a 7 to 11 seed quite easily. And, with the sort of, like I've mentioned before, whether it's on the Buzz or the Outlet or even JVT, the sort of lottery odds have smoothened out. And, there's every chance that, like, that 1 to 2% getting the 8th or 9th seed compared to the 12th seed, it's a better chance that we could get still a decent pick anyway. We saw the Sacramento Kings, who were projected to get the 7th pick, get the 2nd pick, and, the Bulls get the 7th pick. So, it's a luck of the draw proposition anyway. So I'd much rather, have a winning season and then get like, a decent enough pick and, get lucky, because I think, I believe in the karma and the basketball gods and all those sort of things, Nick. So I'd rather have, a fringe playoff run and then get a good guy that we can develop rather than getting like, tanking and having a horrible season and getting, maybe a top 2, top 3 guy.
Yeah, and to Nate Duncan's point, like I think that's what you're thinking if you're just looking at basketball on paper and not thinking it's humans, because you have to remember there's morale, there's culture that you need to build. If you want to attract players, no one's coming to a team that barely scratched 20 wins. You know what I mean? There's not much to get excited about. And even the young guys, it's harder to get them motivated. Jared Dudley, I think on the podcast with Woj, mentioned how like he needed to talk to Devin Booker and he was upset at certain times going on 4 games losing streak. Losing gets to you. You can make an argument that's hurt Jahlil Okafor's career, Nerlens Noel. Like losing all that time in Philadelphia isn't nice. It definitely helps more when you're winning, and I think you can get almost a little bit faster development with a winning team.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you make the point of the fact that, these aren't just, numbers on paper. Like, and I think that a lot of the time, that's what sort of like the hyper analytical podcast can sort of treat these guys as. Like, they're not, these guys are basketballs, they're humans.
Not robots.
They're not robots in any sense of the word, despite the fact that Joe Harris is a bucket machine. He ain't a robot. But yeah, I completely get that, and especially attracting free agents as well. Look for the Nets at least. If there's a chance that, like, we're had horrible injuries and we're going horribly, and it makes the most sense for us to, go down a tanking route post All-Star break. But for the first few months of the season, we're going to be competitive. And, you change the wins that we had last season, we could have been a fringe playoff team even then. Especially in the Eastern Conference, who, I think that there's every chance that we can be. And, we're trying to attract free agents, and losing doesn't attract free agents. The Philadelphia 76ers wouldn't have got, wouldn't have been in the race for LeBron James and Kawhi Leonard.
Or even JJ Redick the year before. Like, just
Exactly.
because Joel Embiid helped them make that push the year before. I know they weren't close to the playoffs, but when he was playing, they were like a playoff team. Then the next year, JJ Redick sees that and he understands, all right, this team, now they're going to get Ben Simmons. I'm going to come here. And now look at them. At points in the playoffs, some of us picked them to come out of the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, and I mean the comments that were made by Ed Davis and Jared Dudley to the media, which we'll chat about, indicated the fact that that we want to be competitive, and I think that that's only going to be a good thing going forward for the guys that we've got, and probably for our young guys as well.
Well, Jack, you already kind of led us right into it. So we're going to start with Ed Davis's conference call. So he talked to some of the media a little bit, and this is kind of on the Nets and having no plans of tanking. And this is Ed Davis. Me being a veteran, I'm not that young of a player, but I know what I signed up for, and all I've been hearing from the front office and the coaching staff is we're trying to win. Obviously, you have to develop no matter what, if it's a young team or an older team. You still want to keep getting better. So, I mean, that comment right there, Jack, kind of makes me think that they're definitely not going to go in that mindset of tanking. They're going to go in the mindset of trying to compete and win. If things change, they change. But it looks like they're telling Ed Davis that they're not going to tank.
No, and obviously, you're not going to attract guys. I don't think Ed Davis would have knocked back teams like the Golden State Warriors, the 76ers, and everyone else if the Brooklyn Nets were like, look, Ed, we'll have you on, but you're not going to play that much, and we're going to be tanking throughout the rest of the year. Jared Allen's going to play 40 minutes. You're going to play maybe 20 here or there. I don't think that's going to be a welcome sight for a prospective free agent. So this is just reiterates and furthers our points. The fact that the Nets aren't going to be tanking, and obviously I think it's going to be a good thing for Ed Davis, because a lot of these guys that we picked up, Kenneth Faried, Jared Dudley, Ed Davis, Shabazz Napier, like I mentioned before about that sort of chip on your shoulder mentality, the contract year mentality, these guys are going to want to have big seasons. They're going to want to not just prove it for themselves, but prove them, within a team system, because some of these guys are aging and their role within teams isn't sort of superstar status. So how they fit within a cohesive environment, a cohesive squad, is going to be what sort of speaks for them and sort of can go, okay, well, this is what he did for this team. This is what he can do for your team. So I think, all these guys are going to have points to prove. I'm hoping that Coach Kenny can sort of, be able to distribute the minutes that allows them to sort of give themselves the chance to do so. And I think, obviously, for a guy like Ed Davis, he's going to get every opportunity. For me, right now, he's probably the best rebounder on the roster. You can make an argument for Kenneth Faried, who probably does it a little bit more athletically. But Ed Davis, for me, is our best rebounder, and I can't wait to see him in a Nets uniform. And, the words that were being told him by Sean Marks are only good things.
Yeah, exactly. I think pretty much everything you just said, Jack, is spot on. Like, not only are these guys going to be in contract years, they're going to be looking to get long-term contracts. And if the Nets were, some people said maybe the Nets going to have a surprising season like the Pacers. If the Nets were to have that, and all these veterans are part of the reason why, it's going to help their case in free agency to be like, yo, I just signed up with the Nets last year. We helped them push to the playoffs, maybe, or right on the cusp of the playoffs. And I kind of looking for more money. And they're like, all right, we can see the impact you've had on this team. And then let's say Ed Davis's case, Portland really hurts in the rebounding department in that big position. And now all of a sudden it's like, all right, this guy actually has some value. So there's a couple different ways to look at it too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Ed Davis is going to be a welcome sight. And I've already, all these guys that we picked up, I'm already salivating to see them in a Nets uniform.
Yeah, you got to go on 2K, download those already updated rosters made by people and stuff, so you can get a little fun.
Yeah, I'm still playing 2K with freaking, we've got Quincy Acey out there. we've got Jahlil Okafor out there. I really need to update the rosters because I'm doing season mode right now, so I can't really do it. By the way, I'm on a 26 game winning streak so far, 33-1 this season, Nets. Hopefully that's a good sign.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, I think a lot of Nets fans would be happy with 33 wins next year, just alone.
Yeah, true.
But I would be happy with that for sure. Moving on to another Ed Davis quote, and this was kind of talking to some of the other Nets about his coming to Brooklyn. I talked to Allen and Jeremy Lin a little bit about the coaching staff and the things like that and how the organization was run, and nothing but great things. I think this team has potential, definitely. We can try to make the push into the playoffs this year. It's going to be a challenge, but that's one of the reasons why I'm here. I mean, that's a great quote.
Yeah, I love the sort of confidence, and I think he can really add something that can give us an edge and give us a different department, a different part of our game. When we've talked about it in sort of when the trade was made, and you guys can go listen to that podcast on YouTube, Blog Talk Radio, and iTunes. But we talked about what he adds to this team, and like I said, he's our best rebounder, and the fact that he has guys. Obviously, Jeremy Lin is gone now, but Alan Crabbe, this is a Shabazz Napier, teammates from last season. We talked about the culture and the chemistry. That's going to only add to it. Those guys are going to have an embedded chemistry already. Alan Crabbe and Ed Davis played great minutes for the Portland Trailblazers when they were, playing playoff type basketball. Shabazz Napier was awesome last season for the Portland Trailblazers and in a lot of lineups with Ed Davis. So I think that these are all good things, and the fact that the other guys are talking and raving about sort of our culture and our staff and blah, blah, blah is only a good thing. And I think that, when we're trying to attract, bigger name free agents like we talked about, ad nauseum, Ed Davis can turn into Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving. But at this stage, it's those comments are great from Ed Davis.
Yeah, and I think people read this. NBA players read the media and they see things like this. I don't know if they're reading Nets Daily or anything like that, but they're understanding, and players are talking. The Nets staff, coaching staff, and Jared Dudley, a great podcast with Woj, which I mentioned before, but give that a listen. He talks about how players are understanding different things about like longevity, different health staff. He mentioned how the Nets have different guys in that conditioning team to make sure that you're fresh all year long and things along those lines. Kenny doesn't kind of overcoach you or over practice you or anything like that. And I think that's a big benefit for the team, kind of getting with the modern times when you have, a guy like Minnesota at Tibbs who might over practice you and your body might be fatigued by it comes playoff time.
Yeah, and I think that it's when you look at what your role is, all these sort of things, like you mentioned, Nick, play into account. I think the staff that's sort of around Sean Marks, outside just the coaching stuff, is a very worldly stuff. Sort of San Antonio Spurs light sort of stuff. And in that sense, you're getting these different perspectives, and you're sort of learning new things because these guys, the NBA season can be a grind for some, and it's an 82 game season, and it's a marathon in a lot of ways. But having these different voices, having these different sort of expertise around them is only going to be a positive thing. Whether that's dietitians, whether that's training staff, whether that's coaching staff, whether that's the trainers, or whoever it is. And I think that these are all good things, and things that can sell us to prospective free agents. And it's already worked. We got a guy like Ed Davis, and we got to a lesser extent Jared Dudley and the rest when other guys were competing for their sort of services.
Yeah, and I think it's just a promising sign, especially when you're hearing good things from players. And we've kind of mentioned on a few other shows where NBA media have said they've heard players talking about Brooklyn next summer as a real possibility and things along those lines. Moving on to Jared Dudley's presser, a little small thing at the training facility. His first quote, and this kind of mentions about coming to the Nets after he almost signed there 2 years ago. The cool thing for me is I always wanted to live in New York. So to me, I think it's like coming full circle with Kenny Atkinson. It's one of the reasons why 2 years ago I thought about this place. It was for him, primarily of his coaching style. Sometimes in life, stuff comes back around. I mean, that's great to hear about Kenny, that people really want to be coached by him.
Absolutely. His time in Atlanta, his time, as an assistant, he is probably, you look at sort of the way that coaching ranks are sort of heading these days. You could make an argument for the fact that Coach Kenny was sort of like, the sort of precursor to all of that, the sort of player development guy, the guy who's sort of like, only wants what's best for his team, is completely selfless in that sort of sense. We're seeing this with like Lloyd Pierce, Igor Kokoshkov, the Charlotte Hornets head coach now from San Antonio. These sort of guys that are sort of like full on about their team, full on about developing their players. No matter what age they are. We saw it from Damari Carroll last year, having one of his best seasons in the league. And, he's been around the league for 10 plus years. I think Jared Dudley's going to have an increased season as well. The fact that he wants to be on the Brooklyn Nets, and, those old tweets were sort of, brought up, blah, blah, blah. But, social
it was
media,
under the Billy King era, so I really don't care about it, to be honest. If it was under the Sean Marks era, maybe I'd be a little salty, but honestly, I don't think that he's completely wrong. At that time, I was kind of surprised about Dwight wanting to come to Brooklyn anyways. Like I was surprised. I didn't expect it.
It is funny, and the fact that the rumors coming out were that Dwight wanted to be a part, would have been happy to be a part of Brooklyn, and Sean Marks was like, nah, I'd rather have these other guys who can probably add a bit more to our roster in their roles, and probably will add something to the locker room, which I think is Jared Dudley mentioned on the Woj pod, and the fact that to add something to the locker room, it helps so much when you're on the court as well. And Damari Carroll showed that in spades last year, and I think Kenneth Faried, Jared Dudley are going to have that opportunity to do that as well. I think Jared Dudley is an upgrade over Dlo+Allen. and to Quincy
Yeah.
Ashi. These guys can add something on the court. And, in that sense, they can, coach while on the court, player coaches in a way, and, be able to give that expertise. They've been around the league. They've seen so many different situations, and they can provide their perspective. And I think that that's only going to be a good thing. Jared Dudley's relationship with Devin Booker, obviously, D'Angelo's going to think the world of him because it's one of his best friends, if not his best friend in the world. So I think, Jared Dudley's only going to add good things to this Brooklyn Nets roster, even if he's not playing a heap of minutes.
Yeah, and talking about D'Angelo and Jared Dudley, this is what Dudley had to say about Jared Allen and D'Angelo Russell. You think about D'Angelo Russell and the talent he has being a lefty coming from the Lakers. Everybody knows his scoring ability. I think for him, and I talked to him on the phone, is how can you make your teammates better? So for him, when I get in here a couple weeks, I like to see how he leads.
I love that. I mean, I love the fact that he's sort of putting the onus on D'Angelo. It's like, this is your team. I think hearing that from coaches, from GMs, obviously it's different than coming from a teammate and a new teammate and a guy that's had an outside perspective as well, coming from the Phoenix Suns. And obviously he's probably got somewhat of a vested interest as well because he's friends with Devin Booker as well. But I love that because I want to see that from D'Angelo. I want to see him run the floor because for me last year, in ways, you could argue that Spencer Dinwiddie ran the floor better as a floor general than D'Angelo Russell did. D'Angelo Russell had greater highlights and probably had better assists in that sort of sense. But for me, as a leader running the floor, Spencer Dinwiddie sort of had that aura about him. Whereas I want D'Lo to have that. He can combine that with his scoring, his three-point shooting, and whatever stats that he wants. But I want him to be a leader. I want this to be his team because if we're trying to attract free agents, if D'Lo's an all-star and we can attract, Kawhi Leonard, Kevin Durant, Jimmy Butler, pairing that with another all-star, you want to get those 2 to 3, superstars to be a championship contender. And if D'Lo can make that step, it's going to start with leadership.
Yeah, and I think one thing for D'Angelo, and I agree, I think Spencer at points in the season definitely looked better as the lead point guard or the lead guard, but D'Angelo had that late stretch in the season where I think there was one game where Orlando that really sticks out to me where he was just such a great point guard, and he just ran the system, and everything was just on point, and that's what I want to see, and I think he's bought into that a little bit more too. And I agree, the leadership thing as well, like seeing him put in all this work this summer. I don't know what he did last summer. Obviously, I wasn't as glued to the Instagram or social media as I am now, but it feels like he's just putting in a grind and focusing more on his body and making sure he's good to go for the season. That's something he said was a goal of the season. And he seems a little bit more mature. And I think that's important too. Being a leader, we always forget he's such a young kid. Now, Dudley's comment on Jared Allen. I think Jared Allen, the potential for him where he's a big that can move side to side, be able to block shots. I know he progressed over the last year, and I think those two are on the cornerstones, and we all have to fall in place and play our roles around them.
I love the sort of the deference from Jared Dudley there, in a sense that, there are a lot of guys, and I highly doubt Dwight Howard would have said that in a presser. I
highly doubt Melo would have said that.
Exactly. All these sort of guys, I think that it's great that they sort of see the potential in our guys and how that they can help them. Not so much like, how can you help me? Jared Allen, how are you going to sort of, set me some screens? How are you going to get me some open look? No, how is it that I can help you? And I can see the potential in you. We've seen Spencer Ronday and a heap of other guys talk about Jared Allen being a top 5 sort of center in the future. And, we've seen, glimpses of it last year, with the rim running dunks, the soul destroying blocks. The consistency, I can't wait to see what Jared Allen can produce this season because so many of our guys are putting in work, and we could spend a whole podcast talking about Jared Allen. And
we could touch a whole podcast about Instagram videos.
pretty much. And, Jared Allen's offseason has been awesome. And, low-key, a lot of guys are talking about him within the Nets squad as well. So I think that a lot of our guys are putting in work, barring any injury, knock on wood. I'm hoping just for good things for Jared Allen. And, I think, again, like I mentioned with Jared Dudley from his perspective, I think he's going to help all these guys because he's been around so many other teammates. He's been around, a guy like a Tyson Chandler, a guy that he's seen who, Jared Allen can probably look to be towards, that sort of offensive rebounding potential that Jared Allen can have. He's sort of seen that from Tyson Chandler, who's one of the best offensive rebounders ever. Obviously, in the waning years now, it's changed a little bit, but, he's been around so many different teammates that he can sort of give that perspective, give that life experience to impart onto him.
Yeah, and one thing I harp on, I think I do it more on the outlet than on the buzz, is the being self-aware. Players aren't self-aware. You look at guys like Carmelo Anthony, sometimes Isaiah Thomas, not understanding where they are in the NBA at certain points and understanding their role. And the fact that Dudley does understand that and he's willing to help the other guys and kind of explain that to them is only going to benefit the team and kind of help them, be better than the 28 team in the NBA.
Yeah, absolutely.
But talking about playoffs in terms of Jared Dudley, this is what he had to say. So does this team have the talent? Close enough. I think defensively we have to take the next step, and offensively shot selection. The Eastern Conference is open for a team to come and grab it. The question is which team is preparing and which team is healthy, but I definitely think it should be a goal. That's great to hear.
Yeah, which team is prepared, which team is healthy. Those are the two things that I take away from that, Nick. We're doing everything when it comes to the preparation. Health is obviously a roll of the dice, and you can't stop injuries and chance things happen. It's just the nature of the league. It's the nature of sport in general when you're an athlete. But to have that sort of preparedness going into the season, being prepared for that sort of long 82-game grind, I think is only going to help us. And the fact that, like we've talked about before, when we were talking about the sort of free agency signings, we have that depth now to plug into those roles. So if we lose a guy, then it's not going to take away so much from us. We can still have that depth in the roster at different positions, so we can sort of go, okay, well, we lose this guy, we can plug in this guy. So hopefully we don't lose too much. It's obviously going to be horrible if we lose any player for any amount of time, but the fact that we have depth means it's going to increase our playoff chances.
Exactly. And the fact is, it also gives you different opportunities for Kenny and the coaching staff to kind of match up with other teams where, last year our best lineup might have been definitely small ball and, not maybe playing a power forward or something like that. Or Rondé playing at the four is obviously undersized. Now the team comes in with two bigger guys. We can kind of match up with that. And there's just a whole bunch of different pieces where he can kind of mix and match and kind of play a little bit of chess out there. But Jack, you ready to hit him with your new social media segment?
Yeah, so I was doing some social media sleuthing. So we'll call
I like it. I like it.
The J-Man social media sleuth. So following obviously plenty of fan pages and plenty of Nets pages on Instagram. One sort of posed the fact that both of these are via clutch Nets. Do you think Dlo and Spencer should start together next year, or do you prefer Alan Crabbe or Caris LeVert next to Dlo? I'll put this to you, Nick, because I think that you'd have a decent perspective on this.
You know what, Jack? I dug into the numbers a little bit and I was like, let me look up these two-man lineup combinations. And the best one was D'Angelo and Allen Crabbe. Dinwiddie and Dlo were minus 77 in 353 minutes. LeVert and Dlo were minus 148 in 466 minutes. And Dinwiddie and LeVert were minus 73 in 767 minutes. So from that perspective, analytically, it looks like Dlo and Crabbe is the best combination. Now, if Spencer were to develop his three-point shot and get a lot more consistent, that would maybe change my mind. Same thing for Caris. I think what Dlo needs is somebody who can play off ball and knock down the three-point shot. I think Crabbe will benefit the most playing with D'Angelo. So I think getting D'Angelo and Crabbe in there, it seems like they have a little bit of chemistry too. So I think I'm probably going to keep that unless somebody comes out with a huge training camp.
Yeah, I absolutely believe that. And like we were sort of talking about just before with the depth, if Alan Crabbe is going to miss a game or two, you can chuck in a Spencer. There are going to be times where it's not going to be the exact same guy starting next to
everyone sprains their ankle when they play basketball. It's like a guarantee.
Absolutely. There are going to be wear and tear injuries. Guys are going to, it's very rare for guys to play 82 games. The fact that LeBron did it last year in his 15th season was, remarkable because he's barely done it in his career overall. But yeah, I was looking up some two-man sort of lineups, advanced sets on NBA.com. And this is via sort of like net rating, so offensive rating, defensive rating. And, as a whole, in 337 minutes, Spencer and Dlo had an offensive rating of 108.1 and a pretty poor defensive rating of 119.6. So a negative 11.5 net rating there. So obviously, defensively, Dlo has a ways to go. Spencer was probably one of our better defenders last year. Limited time, 337 minutes is nothing. But yeah, I think right now, Alan Crabbe is our legitimate starter. You like all the things you talked about, spacing, perimeter shooting, all these different things. It just works best next to Dlo. But, there'll be lineups, and just because they start together doesn't mean that they're going to finish together.
Exactly.
There's going to be different lineups throughout the night. We know Coach Kenny likes to sort of, play round robin in a sense and sort of see what's working well, mix and match. I'm excited to see in the preseason games as well what he sort of goes with as well, because that could be a precursor going into the season, because you don't want to mix and match too much going into the season or like at the start of the season, because you want to sort of have set lineups and sort of set rotations going forward so you can have that consistency for you guys. But there may be a need for experimentation at the same time. And the fact that we have flexibility with such a sort of deep guard rotation because my boy Joe Harris was even mentioned there, and I'd chuck him in there. I think he's a worthy starter, but when you're talking about the spacing, he's a better 3-point shooter than Allen Crabbe, at least right now, based off of numbers. But there will be lineups where Dlo and Joe Harris could play together as well. So it's just nice to sort of be regurgitating all these different names together. It's, I think, going to be positive because backcourt play is such an important part in today's NBA.
Yeah, I think I would be less opposed to if maybe somebody else was taking that starting lineup, but you keep Crabbe in there and maybe you want to put Dinwiddie or LeVert in there. I think that makes more sense, but you need to have at least Crabbe. And I mean, possibly Joe Harris. I'd say the one thing about Crabbe that gives him a little bit more value, if he's able to keep the numbers as high as Joe Harris, is his ability to kind of shoot a little bit more off balance from three. Harris is more of a fundamentally sound guy where, you see Crabbe kind of floating a little bit and he has like more of a get hot ability where he can kind of just like microwave real quick. So yeah. I would definitely leave Crabbe in the starting lineup, but I wouldn't be opposed to maybe taking somebody else out and putting LeVert or Dinwiddie at the 2 spot.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got like the sort of height range, the weight range of a lot of our guys, obviously, but they're putting on muscle as we speak. But, the versatility that we had, like we were sort of talking about earlier, is going to make for some fun lineups. But there's another one I found, Nick, and that we'll finish with. And it's obviously one of those sort of viral ones where it's like, which button do you press? And it's the different sort of colors. So one of the buttons is the Nets have 2 or more All-Stars. One of the other buttons says Nets make the playoffs. Another button says Dlo scores over 22 points per game. The Nets will have the first pick in the draft. Sean Marks trades for Jimmy Butler. And Janan Musa makes the all-rookie first team. There are some doozies there.
I mean, honestly, for me, this one was pretty easy because, like, if you hit this button, the other ones are probably going to happen. And that was have 2 All-Stars. So if the Nets have 2 All-Stars, they're going to make the playoffs because either that means D'Angelo's taking his game to another level and the Nets traded for one, or they, sign one in free agency or whatever, and they're in great shape. And the same thing along Jimmy Butler lines is like, they'll probably get somebody in Jimmy Butler's caliber because I don't know if anybody else on the Nets roster right now is capable of making an all-star team next season. I would definitely probably be shocked by it. So I think D'Angelo is the only guy that really could. So that would mean they'd be able to trade for a big star. And Janan Musa, like, I expect him to have maybe a quiet season and kind of pick up later in the second half because I think he needs to get adjusted to the NBA. I think it's easy to forget international guys. It's a little bit harder just because the NBA is such a different game than what's overseas.
Yeah, we did see there was a post on Twitter making the rounds, and Janan retweeted it. I think it was like a FIBA under 21 sort of international.
And he was number 1, right?
And he was number 1, alongside the likes of RJ Barrett, who's projected to be, funnily enough, the number 1 pick next year. The Canadian prospect. I'm not gonna. I've always, ever since I've been a Nets fan, I've always wanted to have an absolute stud on our team in terms of like a rookie prospect, a Ben Simmons, a DeAndre Ayton, whoever it is. So I'm not going to lie that button wouldn't tempt me because to have a Zion Williams or an RJ Barrett or a Cam Reddish on our team would be pretty awesome. I'm not going to lie about that, but if D'Lo turns into an all-star, we don't need it. So it's fun to sort of debate these, and we could do an entire podcast about each one of these sort of separate selections.
Pretty much.
But I'll probably go with the same one as you because if the Nets have 2 or more all-stars, it's likely that they make the playoffs. It's likely that D'Lo is scoring 22 points per game. But yeah, this is definitely a must sort of follow on Insta, guys, and I'll probably come up with a few more as well because. It's all these sort of things and make the off-season fun, and it's what makes basketball chatter even more fun. It's what makes the Brooklyn Buzz fun. And if you guys have got some scenarios that you want us to chat about, hit us up. Nick will be giving us the plug right at the end.
But definitely. Jack, that wraps it up for today. As always, thank you everybody for listening. You can check Jack and I both out on Twitter. You can check out the brand at OTG Basketball. Also check out Jack at the J-Man JBT, and you can check me out at OTG Nick, OTG_Nick, and also follow us on iTunes, Blog Talk. OTGbasketball.com/radio. Let us know what you think. Shoot us some comments, share us, and also give us those 5-star reviews. Shout out to whoever gave us a couple this week. We appreciate it.